Hello, Nancy Churnin. Thank you so much for being with me. I am super excited to interview you. I have never interviewed an author before, so this is a gift. So, as a quick introduction, I just want to start with actually a question that I've heard you were asked in a previous interview. They asked, "How would you describe what you write?" And I love your response. You said, I look for stories about people who kids might not know about otherwise, people who had a dream, who persevered and changed the world for the better. And I hope that your books will inspire kids to be heroes and heroines too. I just love that.
That's true. That's absolutely, what it's all about. And I'll add that I have to say my mother is a retired teacher, and I also always like to work on the kind of books that she says she would have liked to have had in her classroom.
That's
And
so interesting. So is that why, as soon as you go to your website, it's very clear you've put it in a couple different places that all of your books have free resources and materials for teachers. Did your mom, being a teacher, kind of influence how you put all those things together for us?
no question about that, because I'm always thinking in terms of what my mother would have liked to have had in her classrooms as she retired before my first books were published. But I have to tell you, she has loved the books, and that has filled me with pride. And I like to work with teachers, with educators also to make sure that they will be useful in the classroom, or they will be, you know, useful to librarians as well, to anyone who works with children. One of my most recent books, A Teddy Bear for Emily and President Roosevelt too, I worked with an educator who actually, thank you, yes, she put the teacher's guide on Teachers Pay Teachers, but because I had paid her to do that, it's downloadable for free.
Oh, okay.
Looking for a resource on Teachers Pay Teachers, you're going to find one with all sorts of wonderful activities, the kinds that are just fun and educational for all ages. That my mother was always about that too. She loved books that educated, but she also wanted the kids to have fun. She was always turning learning into a game. And so there's always a mix of fun things you can do, thoughtful things you can do. I love to work with educators who can help me uh, create those kinds of programs. And so, but not only in addition to that, there is a whole separate page on my website. As you know, it just says
Mhm.
teacher's guide. So if you just want to go to one page for all the teacher's guides, you can. But I also have a separate page for each book with a link to the teacher's guide for that particular book.
Yes, you have a very comprehensive website. I love getting lost in it because you definitely can. And I'll definitely link your website when I post this video and share it with my classmates. We'll maybe talk about some other tabs that you have there too, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about this book, For Spacious Skies. And can you tell us what you did this morning?
Oh yes, I was in Balch Springs, in Texas, and the wonderful librarians there at the Balch Springs Public Library, they created a story walk for Spacious Skies, and I was in the public park. It was so joyful because and it was such a wonderful idea because they took a public park, all these wonderful things for the kids to play on. Oh, there's a basketball court, there's a splash pad, and then there's like a little walkway around the green. And around that walkway, they set up a story walk. They took pages from the book, so you could actually just walk around that little walkway and read the whole book out in the fresh air. And I was thinking how much Catherine Lee Bates would have loved it. I mean, For Spacious Skies is the true story of Catherine Lee Bates, who wrote America the Beautiful. And she was inspired by going to the top of Pikes Peak and looking down and seeing how beautiful America was. But as you read the book, you also know it goes to a very deep place for her, because she was a child of the Civil War, and she could see how divided the country was and was looking for a way to unite the country. She was a professor and a poet. And when she wrote this poem, if you look at it when you read her biography, when you read For Spacious Skies, you see She was trying to help people see that we are one American family from sea to shining sea to bring us together. But this is a woman who also she loved nature and beauty. And to think that her book is outside where kids are playing and enjoying the fresh air. I just think, oh my goodness, she would have loved that so much. And how innovative librarians and educators are to reach the kids where they are. So you have kids who maybe just love to be outside running around, but then they can take a moment and appreciate a book. They're going to change the books out each month, but for Spacious Skies will be there all through July.
Perfect for July. And I love story walks. I experienced my first one a couple years ago in my hometown. I was super surprised that my little hometown, which is Spruce Pine, North Carolina, in the Appalachian Mountains, had a story walk. And we are actually getting one at the elementary school that I work at in Fort Worth sometime this year. So I will definitely advocate for one of your books to be put into our story walk at some point as well. But I was wondering if you would allow me to read a couple pages from this book, and then I have a question for
Honored.
you.
Absolutely honored. Oh, and by the way, I just also have to tell you, one of the pleasures of like writing a book like this, I do so much research. And there are so, I mean, when I was talking with the librarians at the Storybook, I was sharing with them so many things I couldn't fit into the book. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm like spilling over with Catherine Lee Bates stories. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to start here actually, where she has reached the summit of Pikes Peak. And she says, "Oh, beautiful. As Catherine gazed from that height, she saw America as one unbroken country with no walls between people. It had been a long journey up the mountaintop, but Catherine was uplifted by the wonder of America. Most glorious scenery I ever beheld, she wrote in her notebook. The first lines of a poem rushed to her head. She wrote and rewrote in her hotel room, trying to get each word right. 2 years later, on July 4th, 1895, a national magazine published Catherine's poem. People turned to one another, proudly sharing the words that described America united as a family. The poem was so popular it was published several more times, and each time Catherine revised it. By the fourth published version, she was satisfied with a poem that had come to be called America the Beautiful. So I was very interested in this particular part of the story, not only to learn what inspired this poem, but that she had this experience on top of Pikes Peak, and she wrote down some initial lines of the poem, but it was not until 2 years later that it was published for the first time. And then she revised it multiple times as it was continuing to be published. And I've heard other authors talk about similar things happening with ideas that they have. Recently, I heard Lester Lamanek, who wrote a book about a big fat cat on the Outer Banks Island. That was an idea that he had when he visited with his then small child, who is now an adult, and it was just recently published. So I wonder if you have any similar stories, and what's it like for you as a writer to hold on to an idea maybe for years and to revise and edit multiple times before publication.
I feel I mean it's interesting. I know that later on you were gonna ask me about interviews I've done with other writers, and one of them was Judy Blume, the great Judy
Hmm.
Blume. And I'm just gonna borrow from that right now
Sure.
because I remembered how inspiring it was for me. I mean, I'm a longtime journalist before I became a full-time children's book writer, and because I wrote about children's books and plays and theater and entertainment, I had the opportunity to interview great writers like Judy Blume. And I remember asking Judy, if you had a magic wish, like, oh, if I could or I could swing your magic wand here, what would you want? And she said, for that first ugly, messy first draft to come out of my forehead, just pour it out like sand in a sandbox so I could start to work with it. And that has helped me so much later when I became a published author because I realized, my goodness, if Judy Blume was so prolific and she writes the writing when you read it, it feels effortless. I mean, you would think this is just somebody talking to you, right? Um, but no, she had to revise and revise and revise, and that helped me. And it's something I also share with kids. I say to kids when they're writing, don't get discouraged if what you put out on the page at first is not what you'd envisioned in your head. It so rarely is. You just have to get that first rush of ideas out and you have to shape it and then you get to work on it. And this is what happens with us all. My first book, the William Hoy story, came about is about the deaf baseball player William Hoy. And I had a friendship with a deaf man named Steve Sandy, who was friends with the Hoy family. His dream was to get Hoy into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I said, "What if I write a book? I'll share it with the kids." And I had not written a book before. Again, I was a journalist, and I made him the promise in 2003, and it then my first book came out in 2016.
Oh wow, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. Guess how many times people say, how many times did you rewrite that? I don't keep track of that. I don't need to do that. I'm not one to plaster the wall with my rejections that I had plenty of. And I'm not one to keep track of. Because I'm more of, I also later, I've written a chapter book about all the people I write about help me a lot, honestly. So, I mean, I wrote a chapter book about Thomas Edison for core knowledge. And I kept this, it was something he said that I really kept to heart also. He said, um, you don't fail until you give up. As long as you keep going, it's a question of how long it takes you to succeed. And he never thought in terms of how many errors he made in making the light bulb. It was just like, it's just how long it took me to make it. And that's how I felt about my story. So yeah, 13 years, but it was worth it. That book was on Texas 2 by 2. It's been on so many state reading lists. It's brought me into so many classrooms. I'm still good friends with Steve Sandy. I've made so many friends in the deaf community. Was that a problem that it took 13 years? No. And you know what? Here's the thing, David. If somebody had bought that very first version of William Hoy, they wouldn't have bought a great book. Maybe it would have been okay,
Hmm.
but it wasn't as good as the book that was published 13 years later.
Hmm.
So I truly believe in my heart that if a book takes longer, it just needs to take longer. And you as a teacher, you must see that children develop at different rates. They learn things at different rates. And sometimes you need to try different ways of teaching or showing. And that's true when we're working on a book. And sometimes we hope it's ready before it is, and we'll send it out. And if you've sent it to a perceptive editor and it's not ready, they'll shoot it back to you and say, not working for me yet. And instead of taking that personally as a rejection or getting down about it, if you think, why wasn't this working? And if the editor is generous enough to tell you why it didn't work, then it gives you an idea of how maybe you could go back and make it more effective. And I'm just, you know what? I'm actually so grateful for the rejections. I'm grateful for the journey because that helped me get the book to where it needed to be. And even though I now have so many books, oh, list of books, and there's more
Oh,
coming.
that's awesome.
I know, but you know what? Some of them still take a long time. Dear Mr. Dickens, I wrote that in 2013, and that didn't come out till 2021. But you know what? It came out when it was ready, when it found the editor that believed in it, when I got it to where it needed to be. And also, every editor I've worked with, these are people who've spent their life with books. They have ideas. So you would say, oh, you got it just right, and the editor took it and then it's done. No, there's not a case in which I've gotten it to an editor, even when it was good enough for the editor, where it didn't still need more work. And
Hmm.
I am grateful to those editors because I want the best book that can be there, I can put out for the kids. I want a book that's going to last. It's almost like building a boat for their imagination. I want that boat to be sturdy. I don't want there to be holes in the boat. I don't want it to crash on an iceberg. I want everything to be airtight. I want it to last for them. So anybody that helps me on that journey, early readers, critique groups, editors, copy editors, I listen to everybody. I mean, I have an idea of what I want. I mean, and what my vision is. I'm not going to compromise my vision, but I am going to work as a team player, right? When you're in a meeting, you may have thoughts, but you still listen to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's true even when you're in the classroom, you're teaching, but you're also very alert to whether the kids are following you or not following you, right?
Mm.
And if maybe you're losing some of them, maybe I bet you start to come up with a different way of maybe to connect with them,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And that's true with a story too, because you may have this great idea for a story, great information to share, just like great information to share in a classroom, and somehow it's not connecting with your critique mates or with the editor. Maybe there's just another way to make that. Maybe there's something that you missed. Maybe there's a connection, or maybe there's just a new way to look at it. So I really view that as a gift and an opportunity to make a better book.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was very insightful. But I want to back up just a little bit. You mentioned some of your background. So, if anyone doesn't know, before you were an author, as you said, you were a journalist and a theater critic, and you covered children's entertainment. You mentioned that you interviewed Judy Blume. You also interviewed Maurice Sendak, correct? Author and illustrator of Where the Wild Things Are.
Adore him.
And one of your favorite questions, as you alluded to, was if you had a magic wand. So I wanted to ask you, if you had a magic wand, Nancy, what would you do?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't want to just echo Judy Blume, but it is kind of brilliant. It was interesting. I was thinking about her the other day because there's a manuscript I've been sitting on for a couple of years, and I was just saying, I know what I want to do with this, but it's kind of complicated because it's a double story and it's about two people instead of one person, and it's a complicated concept, and I kept putting it off and putting it off, and finally I thought, I just gotta get this thing down on paper, then I can work on it. And I finally got it down, and it's about 1,600 words, which is about 600 words too long for a picture book, but I got it down. I got the shape of it. Now I can work on it and have fun. Magic wand, I almost think for me, since I accept the fact that it's a journey, um, sometimes I think just that reminder, just so that sometimes if I when I get because everyone gets a little discouraged, and sometimes some of them take a long time, and it just you can't sometimes see the light or see the way it's there, but you just every time you do it, you're kind of walking in the dark a little bit. And you asked me about being a theater critic. One of my favorite shows is Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim. I don't know if
Mm,
you've ever seen that,
I
but
haven't.
it's such a brilliant metaphor. So he's got these fairy tale characters, and they have to go into the woods to get their wishes. Like they meet a witch, she needs all these things. They have to go into the woods to find the ingredients she needs before she'll grant their wishes. And I'm going, every time you go into a book or creative exercise or a goal, you're actually going into the woods. You're going into uncharted territory. It's dark. Sometimes you can't see where you're going. You can't always see the path. And sometimes, even though we know better, we can get discouraged.
Mhm.
I've been very lucky in my life that sometimes when I'm feeling like, oh, I don't know, I'll get a letter from a child. I mean, sent by a teacher, or
Mhm.
someone like you, David, reaching out and saying that the books really matter to you. Um, I'll get somebody else who wants me to share. I'll get an editor who wants to give me a lift, something. And then I'll go, yeah, it does matter. Keep going. Keep looking for that light. We've done it. We've done this before. It's not the same. Each journey is different, but you've done this, like, it's like every year you have a different class, right?
Yeah,
You class figured out. You know exactly how to reach them, and the next year you get another class. And it's like having another book and story is like that. Yeah, so sometimes just that I will continue to have that little encouragement, that little push, that little reminder that it matters, that it's important, just when you need it. So
yeah,
you got to try and tell it to yourself, but sometimes it just helps so much when you hear it from your community, because I'm doing it for the kids and I'm doing it for the teachers and the librarians and the larger community.
absolutely. You mentioned a couple books that I want to talk about a little bit more. So you mentioned the William Hoy story, and this is the book that you read to my class this year on World Read Aloud Day. And I just want to mention, I don't know if you're planning on doing that this coming school year, but you've read to two of my classes. The first time you read one of my favorites of yours that I don't know if we'll get too much time to talk about, but Manji Moves a Mountain. And this year, like I said, you read the William Hoy story. And both times we've unfortunately had some technological difficulties. But you have rolled with it and you are always so engaging. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted my classmates for this project, and others that I might share this with to see you because you have such a kind presence. And it comes across very clearly that you love what you do. But the William Hoy story you read to us, and then you taught us some sign language. You also mentioned your grander purpose with this book that you alluded to, getting him into the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, can you talk just a little bit more about this book specifically? It's your first book, like you said, um, and I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. And again, you have to remember how this one all started because I have a friend who is deaf named Steve Sandy. My goodness, Steve has dedicated decades of his life, decades, to getting this man in the National Baseball Hall of Fame because, as he pointed out to me, how many deaf players are there in the Hall of Fame? Zero. And
Mm,
you know, representation is so important. And the more I learned about William Hoy, the more worthy I realized he was. And I would say that also William Hoy really shaped my approach. You know, when we talked about my goal and mission in the beginning, I think I got so much of that, so many of those ideas through those years working on William Hoy, because here he was, a man with a dream, a man who was had to persevere. I mean, my goodness, the first time they rejected him was because they thought he was too small for baseball. Then
mm,
because he was deaf and he couldn't hear, and he found a way to bridge the world of the deaf and the hearing by teaching the umpire sign language, safe out American Sign Language, and he ends up having so many friends in the hearing as well as the deaf world, really bringing people together. And that, I mean, that became my role model. That became my model. And I have to say also that I always felt like when I thought about it was a long journey, 13 years. I felt
mm,
that way on my shoulder, and I said to myself, William didn't give up. How can I give up?
mm,
So he inspired me very much. And again, because I got into this to help my friend and his dream, that also shaped the way I approached books because all of my books have projects. That was the first project. Let's get him into the hall. Let's write letters. Never want a book's experience to end on the final page.
mm,
I want kids to see themselves in these heroes, to realize, well, William Hoy wasn't the biggest or the strongest, right? And he could have very easily not accomplished his goal if he'd simply given up. And he had many reasons to give up. I mean, he was rejected, he was laughed at. Similar to Manji was laughed at a lot when
yeah.
he expressed his dreams. And the people who are able to accomplish are the ones who do not give up. So I had that very much in my mind. I thought about William Hoy. That's why I didn't give up, because I'm sure there were people saying to me after 5 years or 6 years, are you still working on that book? Oh, that's not going to happen. How many people think about doing a book and it's like 8 years, 9 years? But again, perseverance. I mean, it's very personal to me. And it's something I want to share with the kids because kids are very self-conscious about being laughed at.
Mm,
Most kids are very self-conscious about even who they are. They think, oh, the person to my right. Oh, I wish I could be the person. Oh, the person to my left, or the person in front of me, or the person behind me. They want that person's hair. They want that person's height. They want that person's build. They want that person's ability in this area or that area. And sometimes they forget to look at the gifts they have within.
yeah.
I like to emphasize William Hoy's deafness was his gift. If he wasn't deaf, he wouldn't know sign language. If he didn't know sign language, we wouldn't have the signs in baseball.
Mm,
Look for gifts. Look for, yes, you can appreciate your neighbors, but don't forget to look for your gifts. We're all a little bit different, and it's for a good reason. And then if you persevere and you don't let yourself be laughed out of your dreams, it can all happen. And so yeah, the project is to help Hoy, but also to show kids that they have power. Because if you're taking an action, it lets you know that your actions matter. and can change things. I'm trying to empower kids with every project.
It's beautiful and so encouraging. The next book that I hope that we can talk to, you also mentioned, Dear Mr. Dickens, and you actually won a couple honors for this book. You won the National Jewish Book Award in 2021, and you received a Sidney Taylor honor in 2022. Um, my professor, I don't know if I mentioned this, but my professor for this course, for this project, is John Shu, and he is also an author.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's so amazing. Oh, wow.
Yes. And one of the questions that he loves to ask authors when he interviews them is about the call. The call when you were notified that you won these awards. Do you remember that call?
Oh my goodness, I remember it so well. And I would like to say also it was a junior library guild selection, and it won first place in the Texas Women's Journalism Award and the Women and the National Jewish Women's Award. I mean, it
Wow.
was just like, and it's been on a lot of school lists. So that call was kind of amazing. Um, I have to tell you, I remember asking my publisher, Albert Whitman, to send that book in for these awards. And they they weren't even aware of these awards. I don't think they'd ever sent in for those awards before.
Mm.
And they didn't even realize they were different awards, like the National Jewish Book Award or the Sidney Taylor, whatever. And I explained, I asked them to send it in. And then when I got the call for the National Jewish Book Award, I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table and my cell phone rang and I picked it up and and it was a Naomi Firestone Teeter from the from the Jewish Book Council, and she told me that Dear Mr. Dickens won the National Jewish Book Award, and and I think I just didn't say anything. And I think she wondered if like the line went dead or something. Because I was thinking because I these are the kinds of things you sort of think about, like you're ready to go, you dream about, and you don't really think it's going to happen, but and so, and then I said, um, am, am I dreaming or did you just say that? And if you said it, say that again. And then she laughed a little bit and she said it again. And I think I may even have cried a little bit because that book was, again, as I said, it was a long journey, 2013 to 2021. um, I was told that it would never work. Kids weren't interested in books about letters. Nobody knew who Charles Dickens was. They certainly didn't know who Eliza Davis was. And that book meant so much to me because I really wrote it for my mother.
Mm,
Because when I grew up, she didn't want me to read Charles Dickens because of his anti-Semitic stereotypes like Fagin.
mm,
I just knew there had to be more to this incredible writer than this. I was like sneaking around copies of like Oliver Twist and Little Dorrit and A Tale of Two Cities, still one of my favorites. And it's like, how could this guy who has such a big heart and did so much for children and the vulnerable and the poor have no heart for this whole group of Jewish people, and who were suffering in England where there was a lot of anti-Semitism at the time.
mm,
And when I discovered about Liza writing to him and about changing his heart and about how he wrote Our Mutual Friend, um, for her, first positive Jewish character, spoke up for the community. I just couldn't wait to write this book. I wanted to see it in print. I wanted to share it with my mother. And it was so, and again, my mother is my first muse. She's the teacher.
yeah.
She was my teacher in sixth grade
Oh,
because
wow.
it was so bizarre because in sixth grade, my teacher had to go away for, I don't know, it was a maternity leave or she was moving or whatever, and they couldn't find a substitute. My mother was the substitute they hired. And it was like so amazing, but she was such an amazing teacher, such an amazing teacher. And it was just a gift to be in her class and to experience that. And I wanted to share that with her. And when it was coming out, she started to have dementia,
Mm,
just starting. and the Albert Whitman I'm so thankful to them. They got me an early copy, so I could share it with her in August before it came out in October. and I got to read it with her, and she read it over and over, and it was just her eyes. I mean, we cried and we hugged because for her, she had felt left out of Charles Dickens's grand vision. And she'd
Mhm.
always sought comfort and inspiration in books and felt that she had been left out of this one. And when she saw that his heart had changed, and all her life she was a teacher trying to change kids for the better,
Right.
he could be changed by a letter that she had a place in his benevolent world. It was just so healing. And by November, by October, November of that year when it finally came out, then she was getting confused and she was saying things like, um, did Charles Dickens get your letter? Did he write back? Because she thought I didn't
Oh,
get the letter. And they said, well, let's read the book. We'll see. And yeah, he did.
oh,
And there was something actually even though so very beautiful about her thinking that I was Eliza, that I had written the letter because
yeah.
in a way I had with my heart. And it was a letter I had dreamed that somebody would write him. And when I found out that someone actually did, I wished I could have written to him, but he was long gone. And then when I found out Eliza actually had written it, it was like a dream come true.
Hmm.
I couldn't wait to share it. And also for kids to read it and to know their voices matter. Like we went back to William Hoy about writing those letters on
Yeah.
William. I want kids to write, to use their words, to use their voices. They matter. Their voices matter. They can change the world.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a special book for so many different reasons. We unfortunately are gonna have to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to mention one more book that I have here that is also one of my favorites of yours, Martin and Anne. Students, I teach fifth grade, and so students come to me knowing a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. and knowing about Anne Frank, but I don't think they know how similar their stories are. And the way that you wrote this is so beautiful. You mentioned your most recent book, a teddy bear for Emily and President Roosevelt too. And I had no idea about this story until I read it recently. And then I just wanted to ask you really quickly, if you don't mind, about an upcoming book you have, Spring 2027. It's a very different book than you've published. It's called Snail's Perfect Passover. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You have really done your homework, David. You're unbelievable. I know I've been sort of playing around and I've been trying to grow as a writer. So, I mean, it was natural for me to start with nonfiction because I was coming out of my journalism career. Although I love all books, I love all my life read, fiction, fantasy. Um, I read anything. I'd read a cookbook. I just love to read everything. Um, and science fiction. Oh, I'm a big science fiction fan. So and Lila and the Jack-o'-lantern, which was about the Irish immigrants who brought their Halloween customs to America, was my first historical fiction. Now,
Hmm.
you're mentioning Snail's Perfect Passover, so this is out and out fiction, right? It's little woodland animals, and I had so much fun with this. Um, and I'll tell you two things about where this came from. And one was, very directly and specifically. Um, PJ Library, which is kind of the Jewish equivalent to the Dolly Parton Imagination Library because they give free Jewish themed books to kids every month.
Hmm.
They asked me to write a board book for kids, and it's coming out in February of next year. It's called Purim Baskets. And the idea of that was a little rhyming guessing game for toddlers. You look at these little baskets, like it's traditional to give out like baskets of goodies for Purim. But I decided instead of baskets for humans, to be baskets for animals. And based on what was put in the basket, you guess the animal, right? And I've done like these animals, and I did too many animals. And one of the animals that got cut was my snail, my snazzy snail, and I missed my snail. Well, I love the book how it turned out, and I think they made the right choices, but my snail was cut. But for me, my characters are so real. Even my fiction, they're so real to me. And I had to find a home for my snail. And so I thought, well, what about this snail? And then I thought about this snail because I called him my snazzy snail. And I thought, oh gosh, but he's like let's say he's making a Passover, which is a special, the Passover thing, and And Passover is a special holiday where we remember, um, the escape from slavery to freedom. And we make this wonderful dinner, and sometimes we get all caught up in making it all so perfect, right? And I've been through that, like where you want to make everything perfect and everything's got to be matchy matchy, and like you spend too much money and you get like the perfect little thing and this thing, and it can all get just so. And then I thought about this Passover, and this little snail is expecting his little friends over, the moose and rabbit and 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 bear. These are his friends, and he's got a perfect little setting for four. And then his three friends come over for this perfect little Passover for four, and they had found a raccoon in the woods all alone with no place to go, a fifth person.
Oh.
Everything was going to be so perfect. He had everything set up. He had gotten rid of all the old dingy things. What do? You got a fifth person. And that's what this little picture book is about when our little snail realizes, well, what is Passover about really? Is it
Mhm.
about having the perfect? Is it perfect because all the pieces are perfect and everything gleams and matches? Or is it perfect because we've opened our hearts and welcomed somebody who maybe had needed a place to go and
Yeah.
needed peace?
Yeah.
And that's what that story is about. And I found a wonderful editor for it, Lily Rosenstreich of Kalani Oat Books. And the minute she read it, Snail went to her heart and the story. And it's so funny, David, because just even yesterday morning, this morning, she's showing me the early sketches from our
Mhm.
illustrator, Eliana, who's been thinking and thinking about this so much. And like we're like how we're going back and forth about how to, portray with should the meal be inside or should it be outside? And with we're like discussing all these things and they're so real to me. And to go back to the beginning, David, when we talked about what my books are about,
Mhm.
um, and while they have been predominantly nonfiction or historical, the essence is always it's about somebody who has a dream. Our little snail has a dream of a perfect Passover.
Yeah.
And he perseveres, and sometimes things don't go the way you think they will. But does he make the world a better place? Does he make his community a little better? Does he make the decisions that make things better? I'm gonna let you think about that. But I hope the kids will think that, what is important after all? What does make our community beautiful?
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun. I'm so looking forward to that book. And Nancy, thank you so much for being my first author interview. This was incredible. It had to be you because you've read to my class twice before. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your heart for writing and a little bit about some of your books that you've written.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for being such a wonderful, inspirational teacher. And just obviously, you're someone who keeps learning. I mean, working in this program, you're somebody who has a thirst for learning, and I know that you share that with your kids as well. I mean, just the way you're always working on something to make it better. When we're always learning, we're always trying to make ourselves reach a little higher, and I can see that in you. And I also, if you'll forgive me, this is definitely a compliment. I can see my mother's spirit in you too.
Oh,
I see how much you care.
thank
I see
you.
how much you care about your kids and about making the world better. And that's what I grew up with, and that's what I try to do.